Hey there! You're watching Confronting Conservatives. I'm Barry P. Cook. It is Sunday, February 19th, just before 8:10 in the morning, and, I find myself needing to confront conservatives again. Specifically, conservative pundit, I guess you could call him, Matt Walsh, who lately has seemed to have a bug quite high up his patootie about transgenderism. He doesn't believe in transgenderism, and he is adamant that the truth is that anyone born XY and with male stuff betwixt their getaway sticks is male, and anyone born XX with female stuff between their getaway sticks is female, and that's just the way it is, and nothing can change that. And I have a big problem with this in at least one respect, and that is the existence of intersexed people. Now, intersex people probably make up something like 0.5% of the population or whatever. And so when you bring that up, conservatives say they're only 0.5% of the population of the world, so you can't use them as a bellwether for anything. Except you can, because it doesn't matter what percent of the population of the world they make up or how many of them there are. And the reason it doesn't matter is because while the intersexed are, in effect, both genders to one degree or another, biologically, they are not both genders in any other respect. And interestingly, to this point, that has tended to be because of the same gender binary that Republicans are so married to, or conservatives, I should say, are so married to. This idea that there are only two genders. Well, okay. In that case, then which gender are intersexed people? Because you can't say they're a third gender, right? Because now you're saying there are more than two. So, if they're not a third gender, which gender are they? Because they all live as one or the other, right? Or many of them live as one or the other. They don't live androgynously, right? They present themselves and live as one gender or the other of this binary that the conservatives are so married to in most, if not all cases, to my knowledge. And by that I mean they wear the clothing associated with one gender, they wear their hair in a way that is more closely associated with one gender than another. They will use the pronouns of one gender. They will use the titles of one gender, Miss, Mrs., Mr. And so the question becomes, when they're making these choices to live and present as a member of one gender, what are they basing that decision on? How do they know which gender they are? Because biologically, they're both, right? To one extent or another. If not in all cases, in some cases. So, how do they know which gender they are? Do they flip a coin and just go with it because they're blank slates? Psycho-emotionally, psychologically, and you can just pick one? Or do they intrinsically, inherently know which gender they are, mentally, psycho-emotionally, psychologically? Well, it's the latter. And what that means is that gender is not solely a matter of your chromosomal makeup and what stuff you have between your legs. There's a mental, psychological, psycho-emotional component. Your psyche has a gender. And if your psyche has a gender, and a psyche can be born into a person with at least one set of chromosomes that's incorrect, on top of the one that's correct for their psyche gender, then a person can be born with only one set of chromosomes in total that doesn't match their psyche gender. So you can't say that no one born with XX chromosomes is male, and that no one born with XY chromosomes is female. Because the intersexed not only are that, right? Are both of those, because intersex people are XXY, meaning they could be XY or they could be XX. So if that anomaly exists, you can't then say that other anomalies don't exist, and that just because you can't see an indication externally or in their genetic makeup that a person is female versus male, doesn't mean they're not. And sometimes, or at least in the past, the intersexed have had their gender literally chosen for them by medical professionals or their parents or a combination of both, where one set of their stuff would be surgically altered, removed, or sometimes both, remove one and alter the other to be functional. In the case of a intersex person that was chosen by someone to be female, or the other way around. One is surgically altered to no longer sort of be functional so that the other set would be the only set. And if you don't think that some of those people grow up recognizing that the wrong choice was made and that their true self isn't the gender that was chosen for them, but the other one that they could have been if a different choice had been made for them, you're crazy, because of course that's happened. There's no way that every time they've made that choice for someone, the medical professionals and parents have gotten it right. Because people are not blank slates psychologically, such that if you had the physical option of being both, either one would work if someone else picked it for you. So that's further proof that gender is at least partially, if not entirely, psyche-based, psycho-emotionally based, psychologically based, emotionally based. So what happens in the case of transgendered persons is they get the wrong psyche for their chromosomes and their stuff, and they want to correct that surgically and be treated as the gender they actually are. There's just no two ways about it. Because if an intersexed person, as an adult, went to a doctor and said, look, I was born intersexed, and the doctors and my folks decided that it made the most sense for me to be female, but that's not who I am in my psyche. So you need to reverse that, and we'll go with the other option. Would someone really try to tell them, well, no, you're actually female, the doctors got it right, you just have a mental problem that needs psychological treatment so that you'll be okay living as the gender that was chosen for you? No one would say that. You'd say, oh, well, you are actually the other gender and someone got it wrong when they chose which one you should be. Okay, we'll fix it. But then these people would turn around and say to a transgender person the exact opposite. That how they feel, what their psyche is telling them, is just incorrect. Because they only ever had that one set of chromosomes and that one set of stuff, and that's it. That's just ridiculous.
Now, for the moment, forget all of that genetic stuff that I was just talking about and that psyche stuff, and think about this. These people, these conservatives, they tend to be Christian. And Christians tend to believe in something called the soul, right? And what's your soul? It's your essence, your core being, your spirit, that part of you that is not of the body, a part of you that is separate from the body, and that continues to exist after the body perishes. And they believe everybody has one, at least everybody who's been baptized. But anyway, that's a Catholic thing. I don't know if it's all of Christendom that feels that way. But anyway, this is what conservatives tend to believe, right? That you have a soul and that it continues to exist, heaven, hell, purgatory, wherever, after your body perishes. So what I want to know is, when Matt Walsh's mother passes away, assuming she's still with us, when he refers to his mother's soul as looking down on him from heaven, for example, will he refer to his mother as something other than she? Or will he say, I know she is looking down on me from heaven and smiling. I know she is looking out for me from heaven. That's what he'll say, right? She. Well, I need something explained to me then, because if it is only your physical body, your chromosomes and your stuff, that determines your gender, then why would you refer to the soul of a deceased person as either he or she? How would their physical traits that they had in life affect their post-life existence, their non-corporeal form, their soul, their spirit? Or do souls have chromosomes and stuff? So I think we know the answer, right? The answer is that if indeed souls have a gender, then it's because souls have a gender, right? Just inherently. And if that's the case, then who are conservatives to say that a female soul doesn't wind up some percentage of the time in a body with male chromosomes and male stuff? In their mind, God creates everybody, right? Well, some people come out missing limbs. Some people come out with 2 different color eyes. Some people come out with a Down syndrome. Some people come out blind or deaf or both, or stuck to another person, etc., etc. So who are these people to say that the same God that they say did those things didn't put a female soul, just like Matt Walsh's mother has a female soul, into a male body? Where do they get off saying that? It's ridiculous. Anyway.
Here's another way that we know that gender is not actually determined just by your chromosomes and your stuff. And when I say here's how we know, I mean here's how I know, and it's how we should know. Take someone like Richard Simmons. Now, Richard Simmons has never said that he identifies as anything other than male. And as far as I know, he uses he, him pronouns and so forth. But what I want you to do is think of people like Richard Simmons, who exist in the world like Richard Simmons, who behave in the world like Richard Simmons does, who present to the world like Richard Simmons does. Often people like that are gay, male attracted, while living their lives identifying themselves as male and being considered male by the world. Now, I would never take that decision away from them, but isn't the fact of the matter that those people are female with male genetics and male stuff? Not all gay men, but the ones that present the way Richard Simmons does, what we would call very effeminate or very flamboyant. If you're honest, aren't those people really women, female, just with male bodies and male, chromosomes? Isn't that the truth? Just because they're not acknowledging it doesn't mean it's not true. And again, I would never take it away from them. They have the right to claim or live as male because they have the genetics and the stuff. So I'm not going to tell them they don't qualify because they qualify on that basis. But aren't they really just female? Isn't that what they are? So unless you think that presentation, that way of moving through the world, that affect that they have, these people that are like Richard Simmons, is entirely put on and entirely a conscious choice, you have to know that that's just who they are, that it's innate, that they came out of the womb as a person who grew up with that affect, which we all recognize doesn't match their physical body, because their physical body is that which matches the physical body of people like Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, whom no one would deny is male. The point being that people like Richard Simmons are female in their psyche. They just have male bodies and they're okay living on paper as male. And quite frankly, the idea that someone like Richard Simmons, not himself, someone like Richard Simmons could come out and say, you know what, I'm a woman in a man's body. And we would look at them and say, no, you're not, because you have XX chromosomes and a pecker, is fucking absurd to me. It's absurd. Those people are clearly what we think of as female. So if some of them choose differently than Richard Simmons, and want to acknowledge this fact about themselves, why would we tell them they're wrong? And further, as to the gender binary, if someone like Richard Simmons wanted to come out and say, well, I've got male physiology and I'm clearly a woman otherwise, I'm not either of those things, I'm gender fluid, or I'm a third gender called Woofendupa. Who are we to say that no, there's no third gender because there are only two? And clearly that's not true. Clearly, gender is a fucking spectrum. You got Richard Simmons over here and you got The Rock over here. They're both considered male? Because why? That's ridiculous. Now, clearly, scientifically, there are three types of humans. The intersexed, XX people with V between their legs, and XY people with D between their legs. No one's denying that. But why do we then, as a society, have to say that those two types of humans can't be subdivided into multiple genders? Of course they can, because gender is a construct. And the reason that's true is because so much of it is characterized by how people dress, how they wear their hair, and what their affect is. To the point where if a person who is female, as we understand it scientifically, by biology, that lives in the world in such a way that they can be easily mistaken for male because of how they walk, how they talk, how they dress, what their interests are, whether they are or aren't gay, we have a word for it, right? We call those people butch. Those are butch females in the common nomenclature. If a person who is female, as we understand it scientifically, by biology, who present in the world in the way that we consider to be feminine, high heels, dresses, makeup, painted nails, lipstick, which is makeup, I guess, female interest, quote unquote, we refer to them as girly girls, right? Then you have tomboys, who aren't quite butch, but they're not girly girl. You have tomboys. That's a thing, right? It's a word that we use to describe an ex person who's a little more boyish in the way they live than typical XX humans. So we already do this, and we've already been doing it for time and memoriam, recognizing that these people need another word for what they are. And what conservatives want to do is pretend that it isn't proper to consider the people who fall into those groups, tomboys, girly girls, butch, or in this case, just butch and tomboy, because we already really consider girly girls female, as their own genders. Not that a whole lot of tomboys and a whole lot of butch people are necessarily clamoring for that. I'm just saying that if that were to occur, and a biological female who is sort of a tomboy wanted to say, you know what, I'm biologically female, but I have a boyish affect, and I have, interests and hobbies and behaviors that are more aligned with maleness than femaleness, and, I'm kind of a mix, so I don't think I should be pigeonholed as female or male. I want to be considered geschnoff gender, based on a combination of things, not just my chromosomes and what's between my legs. And conservatives would say, no, we're not going to elevate that to a gender. Why? There's no reason not to. Two human types, not counting the intersexed, XX, XY. Cool. within each of those types, there's a range of genders. Why can't we do that? The reason we can't do it is because conservatives want to have an axe to grind against liberals so that they can rile up other simple-minded, close-minded people into a frenzy that they then will use to motivate them to vote against Democrats. That's the only reason. Oh, and because God. Because they're religious nuts who don't understand that every anomaly you see in society comes from God. God did it. If God exists, that is. If their God created everything, then where did it come from? This tomboy thing, this butch thing. And it goes the other way, by the way. You have alpha males, again, The Rock, right? Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? And then you have guys who are somewhat effeminate, not so much maybe Richard Simmons level, but guys who don't go out for sports, who would rather, cook or bake, who maybe are a little squeamish. You would call them girly men, right? That's a thing. It already exists. We already recognize that not everybody designated male or considered male by society based on biology is actually that functionally. We already recognize that people don't all live that way as what we consider male, even though they are that biologically. We already recognize it. So if some of those people want to come out and say, I'm actually female, or if some of those people want to come out and say, you know what, I'm neither one, and I want to be considered, this, bukachuka, gender, why can we not go, oh yeah, hey, that makes sense? Two types of people, XX, XY, and then within those groups of people, subdivisions. Now this is going to sound crass, but we do it with dogs. Yeah? Canine. Yeah? Dog, right? Chihuahua. Beagle. Saint Bernard. Right? Huh. No one says that's anti-scientific, but because you can't see those differences, yeah, you can see them. You can see them with people, yet we don't do the same thing. Why? It's ridiculous. And I told you the reason why is because if conservatives agree that this is the way things are, they lose a wedge issue that they can use against Democrats. We have to stop the Democrats because they want to create a crazy world, where people who present in the world like Richard Simmons can say out loud that they're not in fact the same thing as The Rock just because they have XY and a pecker. That's the crazy, topsy-turvy world the Democrats want to create, and we have to vote against it because it's just not the truth. It is. We recognize it. We call them girly men. So, not surprisingly, once again, conservatives are full of shit. And Matt Walsh is full of shit. And he needs to shut the fuck up. But I guess that's all I'm going to say for now. You can at me if you want. I'm on the Twitter. You can make a comment on the video. But I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back to confront conservatives soon, I'm sure. But for now, I'm Barry P. Cook, and you've been watching Confronting Conservatives.